Good day, everyone. I am Rosal Alvarasco from BSE 1B, and now I will be discussing the chapter 12, which is the love of oneself. So, before a person is able to practice it, first we need to understand what it means. Self love is a state of appreciation for oneself that grows from actions that support our physical, psychological, and spiritual growth. So, also, self love means having a high regard for your own well being and happiness. Furthermore, self love means taking care of your own needs and not sacrificing your well being to please others. So, also, self love means not settling for less than you deserve. Self love defined as love of self or regard for one's own happiness or advantage has been conceptualized both as a basic human necessity and as a moral flaw. To vanity and selfishness, synonymous with a more proper conceit,edness, egotism, narcissism, and many more. Wisdom, according to Socrates, begins with this one basic principle, which is know thyself. He referred to the human mind as a storehouse of truths which man has only to recognize and realize in order to acquire a true and certain knowledge of what we ought to become as persons. If anyone knows what is right and true, he cannot help but choose it and act consistent with it. Accordingly, Socrates viewed knowledge as synonymous to virtue. Ang karunungan daw ayon kay Socrates po ay nagsisimula po sa isang pangunahing prinsipyong kilalanin mo ang iyong sarili. Tinukoy niya ang isip ng tao bilang isang kamalig-namang katotohanan na dapat lamang kilalanin at matanto ng tao upang magkaroon ng tunay at tiyak na kaalaman sa kung ano ang nararapat nating gawin bilang isang tao. Kung alam na ng sino man kung ano ang tama at totoo, hindi niya maiiwasang piliin ito at kumilos ng naaayon po dito. So now let's talk about the love and selfishness. To know ourselves is to love ourselves. To love ourselves is to acknowledge the fundamental goodness of our nature and to share it with others. So, love is the tendency toward what is good. Selfishness is withdrawing in ourselves, putting ourselves ahead and above all others. Love thrives on justice, on what is honest and beautiful. Selfishness is the overflowing of greed and pride. It is true that loving ourselves means being consumed with our needs, but our preoccupation with ourselves must be regulated by temperance, including others is selfishness, it is narcissism. So no man lives for himself alone. The concept of man for others is not a novelty. We find ourselves in the self of the other. So this is how it is since our human nature is social. The commandment love your neighbor as yourself as tell us both the why and how. So we love our neighbor because he is like us, a person. We should love him by not doing to him what we do not want to be done to us. When we do this, we show our concern not only for others but our great respect for ourselves. So, self love is founded on the idea that in order to succeed in any capacity in life, whether as a child, parent, lover, friend, or a professional man. So we need to look after on our own selves. If we constantly put our own needs on the back burner and pander to what other people expect of us, more often than not we will burn ourselves out. But what often happens is that we use self-love as an excuse to get out for our social responsibilities, and in the process end up hurting people. There are people in the world who gain a superficial understanding of a phenomenon and try to apply it in their late lives. So what they end up doing in messing it all up. So these people are called fondly pseudos. When it comes to self-love, there are many pseudos out there who believe that their path is more important than their relationship. So they know the ingredients of living well: accountability, authenticity, non judgment, but they follow all this without any introspection. So, without introspection, self love becomes selfish. It is marked by defensiveness, elusiveness, and a lack of care for others. There is a difference between wanting to be with yourself and not wanting to be with others. A lot of people use self love and spirituality to run away from others and their problems in lives. So it is not uncommon. These are the people who drink and get high in the name of existentialism, have multiple relationships in the name of authenticity, and blame other people for not owning up to their feelings when they may have hurt them. So they expect others to be accountable but won't hold themselves to the same standard. There is a big difference between self-love and selfishness, which is selfishness is all about taking care of oneself without thinking of others, while self-love is about caring for oneself while still being considerate of others. Ultimately, self-love leads to happiness, while selfishness can often lead to unhappiness and resentment. If you want to be happy and fulfilled, you must learn how to love yourself unconditionally. So let's come now to the ethics of self perfection. So it is our duty to develop by actualizing our potentials. In the biological sense, this means growing in years and maturity. In the moral sense, this means molding our character ethics insofar as it directs us towards this goal is called the ethics of self-perfection. The goal of ethics, as Paul Tillich points out, is to become a person in the community of persons. In Filipino, this is translated to pagpapakatao. Equipped with the natural powers for self-development, man does not need money or expensive mechanical devices to build a splendid character. For tillage, it requires only that we actualize what we are essentially and therefore what we are potentially. So all that one has to do is to apply the intellect and will on those values that truly reflect our nobility as persons. So the systematic improving of qualities and habits of behavior, whether moral, physical, or ethical, constitutes the activity of self-perfection. This will normally be in order to correspond with some determined ideal. So It depending on the social and the historical conditions under which a person lives. So, kapag ang isang taong individual ay umaabot sa isang sapat na mataas na antas po ng kamalayan at kaalaman sa sarili, siya ay may kapasidad kapwa para sa pagsusuri at pagmamasid sa sarili at para sa pag-unawa sa mga aksyon ng iba. So, motivated by the wish for acceptance and authority in a peer group, an individual develops personal qualities by self-perfecting. So, on different level, the aim of an individual on a spiritual path such as yoga is also called self-perfection. Let's proceed to the integral values of the person. So, the integrity of the person is the totality of his being as composed of body and soul. So, actualizing then our potentials is like with a hierarchy of values. Earlier, we have classified values as biological, intellectual, and moral. Insofar as these values are integral to our development, we have both the duty to seek them out and the right to possess them. So, let's talk about the biological, intellectual, and moral duties. Let's talk first about the biological duties, which means are those pertaining to the preservation of life and the maintenance of health and bodily functions. It is the duty of everyone to take adequate nourishment, food, and rest in order to preserve physical well-being. One should observe personal hygiene and avoid risks to his health and safety. So ito daw po ay ang mga nauukol sa pangangalaga ng buhay at pagpapanatiling ng kalusugan at mga tungkulin ng katawan. Tungkulin ng bawat isa na kumuha ng sapat na pagkain at pahinga upang mapanatili ang pisikal na kagalingan. So, dapat sundin ng isang tao ang personal na kalinisan at iwasan ang mga panganib sa kanyang kalusugan at kaligtasan po. So, let's now come to the intellectual duties, which means are those pertaining to the development of our intellect and will. It is the duty of everyone to overcome ignorance by learning a skill or by acquiring a science. It belongs to human dignity that one is at least knowledgeable of those things directly affecting his life. Intellectual competence promotes self-reliance and qualifies a person to be of help others. So, dito naman po ay nauukol sa pagpapaunlad ng ating talino at kalooban po. Tungkulin ng lahat ng pagtagumpayan ang kamangmangad sa pamamagitan ng pag-aaral ng isang kasanayan o sa pamamagitan ng pagkuha ng isang agham po. So, nauukol sa dignidad ng tao na ang isang tao ay may kaalaman man lang sa mga bagay na direktang nakakaapekto sa kanyang buhay. So, ang kakayahang intellectual ay nagtataguyod ng pag-asa sa sarili at ginagawang komplikado ang isang tao na tumulong sa iba. So, yun po. So, let's now come to the moral duties, which means are those pertaining to the development of the spirit or character. These consist in the practice of religion and exercise of moral virtues. The moral duties are above all other duties. Man's perfection is moral. It is moral integrity which crowns man with the fullness of his dignity as a human being. So humans are either rich or poor, educated or illiterate, strong or weak, young or old, healthy or sick. beautiful or ugly. But the only distinction that really matters is that between a moral and an immoral person. So, ito naman po ay nauukol sa pag-unlad ng espiritu o pagkatao. Ito ay binubuo sa pagsasagawa ng relihiyon at paggamit ng mga moral na bertud. Ang mga tungkuling moral ay higit sa lahat ng iba pang mga tungkulin. Ang pagiging perpekto ng tao ay moral. Ito ay moral na integridad na nagbibigay korona sa tao ng kabuuan ng kanyang dignidad bilang isang tao. So ang mga tao ay mayaman man o mahirap, may pinag-aralan man o hindi marunong magbasa at sumulat, malakas o mahina man, bata o matanda, malusog o may sakit, maganda o pangit. Ngunit ang tanging pagkakaiba na talagang mahalaga ay ang pagitan ng isang moral at isang immoral na tao. So let's talk about the heroes, saints, and martyrs. So heroes, saints, and martyrs are not born, they are made. Heroes, saints, and martyrs have in common in character. They nurtured those attitudes and habits that set them apart from the ordinary man. They shaped their own character and directed their destiny. They are the models, the light for the rest of the mankind. So, great men vary in their achievements and in their greatness, but each does not fail to awe and elicit admiration. So, each exemplifies what kind of person we ought to be by our own volition. So, heroes, martyrs, saints, we are fascinated by brave heroes, strong-willed visionaries, and staunch defenders of what is supposedly right. Stories about them interest at the same time motivate us to emulate the protagonist. So, heroes like this provide an example for our own lives and can bring hope in difficult times. And it is irrelevant whether the person is a historical or fictional figure. So, around 50 exhibits from the 13th to 15th century, highlights from the museum's collection of sculptures and paintings illustrate an medieval idea of an exemplary life and the sure route to paradise. So, an archetype for recounting great heroic deeds, the hero's journey, has become established, and from classical texts through to Hollywood movies has been based on a similar dramaturgy. So the hero or heroine follows a calling. It is put to the test, must avert danger while risking his or her own life and put things back on an even keel. So there are numerous examples such as Saint George saving a princess from a dragon, or Saint Vitus who was thrown to the lion but spared. So, how did the people of the late Middle Ages know of these stories? Where did they find out about them? So, the exhibit shows how people identified with heroes, martyrs, and saints in the religious world of the late Middle Ages. So, let's move on to our basic personal rights. Correlated to our natural duties are the rights essential to our integrity as persons. The right to religious worship is one of them. Let us consider here the following, which is the right to life. The second one is the right to private property, and the last one is the right to education. The right to life. So, the right to life is the most important of all our rights. It is the foundation, we may say, of all other rights. The 1987 Constitution expressly guarantees this right, that our right to be alive and to be secure from physical harm is a primordial duty of the government. So the right to life secures us not only from physical harm but provide for the promotion of our economic, cultural and spiritual growth. So everyone's right to life shall be protected by law. No one shall be deprived of his life intentionally, save in the execution of a sentence of a court following his conviction of a crime for which the penalty is provided by law. This means that nobody, including the government, can try to end your life. It also means the government should take appropriate measures to safeguard life by making laws to protect you and, in some circumstances, by taking steps to protect you if your life is at risk. So, the public authorities should also consider your right to life when making decisions that might put you in danger or that affect your life expectancy. So, if a member of your family dies in circumstances that involve the state, you may have the right to an investigation. So, the state is also required to investigate suspicious deaths and deaths in custody. So, the courts have decided that the right to life does not include the right to die. The right to private property, which is derived from the right to life, is the right to private property. Precisely because man has the right to life, he also acquires the right to private property to those necessary for the sustenance and maintenance of life. In his encyclical on the condition of labor, Pope Leo the declares that it is within man's right or have things, not merely for temporary and momentary use, but in stable and permanent possession. So man's survival would be uncertain if he does not have the means for support of life at his disposal. So Saint Thomas Aquinas, however, distinguishes between the right of possession and the right of use. So one of the most common example is private property is the ownership of a home. The owner of a house typically has the right to live in it, sell it, or rent it out to others. So another example of that is private property is a car, just a with a house. The owner of a car has the right to drive it, sell it, or lease it to others. So, di ba po, hanggat nasasabing sa atin ng isang property, ay may karapatan tayo dito. Walang kahit na sino man ang may karapatang mangialam sa property mo, kundi ikaw lang mismo. So, yun po yung rights natin. The last one is the right of education. The right of education comes from man's rational nature. Every child is entitled to be educated by his family, by the state, and by the church. In the Philippines, the education of children is a serious concern of parents. The sacrifices Filipino parents are willing to endure in order to send their sons and daughters to college mark their love and nobility. So, support of children as defined by the 1988 Family Code includes schooling or training for some profession, trade, or vocation, even beyond the age of majority. So, the right to education po has been recognized as a human right in a number of international conventions, including the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which recognizes a right to free, com- compulsory primary education for all, an obligation to develop secondary education accessible to all with the progressive introduction of free secondary education as well as an obligation to develop equitable access to higher education, ideally by the progressive introduction of free higher education po.